Justin Wilcox climbed out of the car tiredly. It was Friday, and it had been a long and tiring week at work. Not only had work been plagued with one problem after another, but his thoughts kept returning to problems at home. His wife, Lois, had been very distant lately. Heck, he told himself, she'd been getting more and more distant for over a year now. It all started when the company she worked for moved her from a clerical job to become administrative assistant to the president. Lois and Justin had been married for 7 years now, and at least for Justin, for almost 6 of those years, the marriage had been quite successful. They had gotten married right after he earned his MBA. The only downside to Justin's marriage was that Lois kept putting off having children. However, even if Lois had never wanted children, Justin would have been content. He was so deeply in love with his wife. Justin worked as a vice president at a small cybersecurity firm. He left one of the larger security firms, G4S, to help start a new firm, Telco Security. In his 5 years on the job, Justin had managed to land several large government contracts and build relationships with some of the largest companies in the country. Currently, they were not handling all the work. In anticipation of 7 new contracts, the company was about to hire 10 new employees. When Justin earned his MBA and a separate master's degree in computer science, he was hired by G4S, one of the largest security companies in the country. Shortly thereafter, Justin and Lois were married. Their relationship ebbed and flowed, but eventually became permanent. Truth be told, Justin felt that Lois had settled on him, and it bothered him. Yes, Lois was gorgeous, but Justin couldn't be called liver either. He was 6 feet 2 inches, 190 pounds, blonde hair and blue eyes. Justin knew he wasn't on Lois's list of ideal husbands. He wasn't rich. Over time, Lois seemed to settle into the marriage and became the loving wife Justin wanted her to be. That was until Augustus Grant came into their lives. 2 years after the wedding, despite Lois's persistent objections, Justin took a job with Telco. The initial friction over the job change had subsided over time as Lois realized that their lifestyle hadn't suffered in the slightest. They had even talked about having children, but almost 13 months ago, Lois had started working for August Grant, the president and CEO of Triplex Financial. It was a hedge fund that dealt in risky investments that allowed them to make huge amounts of money regardless of the state of the stock market. Justin knew that successful hedge funds could make obscene amounts of money, but they were also risky. Before Lois took the job, Justin had done a little research on his own. The idea behind this part of the financial industry was to develop investments that made a lot of money. However, if they started to fail, the hedge firms supposedly had an exit strategy. Of course, in a rising market like the one we are in now, almost all investment vehicles worked. However, if the market suddenly began to correct, everything could go to hell quickly. Justin was surprised to learn that Triplex employed almost as many scientists and accountants as brokers. They designed investment products in such a way as to maximize returns, while at the same time providing a reasonable opportunity to exit the investment with minimal losses if things started to deteriorate. Justin also learned that Triplex had a well-deserved reputation in the industry. Knowing this, Justin was confident that Lois was working for a quality company. August Grant was a 52-year-old man who had worked his way up the corporate ladder. Justin had met him once at a Triplex event and had found him to be overbearing, but not without charm. However, Justin had been uncomfortable with the all-too-familiar manner in which Lois and her boss spoke. When he noticed it, however, Lois laughed at his jealousy. As she pointed out, Augustus was 22 years older than her. Nevertheless, Justin felt uncomfortable. As time went on, Lois began to distance herself from her husband. She became more critical of Justin's actions and spent more time at work. Their intimate life went downhill, and they began to fight more often. Justin painfully watched his wife drift away from him day by day. And the only person he felt comfortable with was his administrative assistant, Jennifer. She listened and didn't judge him. Even though his whole body shuddered at the thought of confrontation, the atmosphere in his home had become oppressive. Regardless of the consequences, Justin knew he had to follow through. The subject of Augustus Grant and his inappropriate relationship with his wife must be broached. Walking tiredly up the steps, Justin entered the house. His wife was sitting at the kitchen table sipping wine. "Justin, sit down. We need to talk," his wife said coldly. The words, "we need to talk," felt like an icy knife stabbed into his chest. Those words instilled fear in the heart of any spouse who heard them. Although Justin dreaded this confrontation, he sensed it was coming and prepared himself as best he could. "Yes, this conversation is long overdue," Justin said softly. "I've been thinking about the fact that we've been estranged for a long time. I think I've let this situation drag on for too long, and we need to resolve it from the beginning." Justin paused for a second and then continued. "Lois, I want you to know that I've loved you from the very first moment we met. I thought we had a very good marriage until you started working for Augustus Grant." Lois interrupted him with a wave of her hand. "Let me talk first. I don't want to get into a discussion with you, Justin. I want a divorce." There it was, the end of his marriage. Everything Justin had done to try to save it had failed. A sense of failure overwhelmed him. A sense of sadness for what had been but was now gone seemed to fill his stomach. His wife's demand did not come as a surprise to him. He had been expecting something like this for months now. But now that it was spoken aloud, it stunned him more than he had realized. His shoulders slumped, and he leaned back in his chair. Sighing, Justin asked the obvious question. "Why?" The expression on Lois's face was hard, devoid of any compassion. She squared her shoulders and smiled a thin, unpleasant smile. "I fell in love with Augustus, and he asked me to marry him. I can safely say I love him as I never loved you, and he's much better in bed than you are. Besides, he's rich and can provide me with a much better life than you ever could." That last statement made Justin tense up. But if Lois noticed the effect her unpleasant and insensitive words had on him, she didn't show it in any way. It was painful to realize that this woman had absolutely no feelings left for him. It also confirmed what he had long suspected. Lois had been cheating on him for months now. After so many years of love spent together, how could this woman be so cold-blooded? After months of reflection, he no longer had any doubts about the relationship between Lois and Augustus. He knew that his wife had always been the type to keep up with the Joneses. Still, it hurt him that Lois didn't think his efforts were enough. He'd never refused her anything. If she needed new clothes, Justin let her buy them. When she wanted a Jaguar, he leased it even though he thought the car was a piece of crap. When she wanted a bigger house, they went hunting at country club estates. Justin had let Lois pick out the house she wanted, and even though the mortgage was a lot more than Justin wanted, he had bought it. Justin felt bad that all of this wasn't enough, but he held back. Instead, he pointed out the obvious. "He just divorced his third wife. What makes you think he's going to keep you around?" "Oh, Justin, don't be an ass. I know it's hard for you, but you're going to have to accept that our marriage is over. I hope it's not too hard for you." Lois then pulled an envelope out of her purse. "I think you'll find that the terms of the divorce are quite favorable to you," Lois said as she unfolded the papers and held them out to her husband. "If I had wanted to, I could have made your life very difficult and expensive. Instead, I've decided to be generous. I am giving up all rights to this house. However, I am taking half of our checking and savings accounts and half of our investment portfolio. August will pay off the lease on the Jaguar. He says it's a terrible car and he's going to buy me a brand new Porsche." Justin looked into his wife's eyes and saw the cold indifference she radiated toward him. Lois looked at him like he was a bug. Justin decided not to tell her that he thought the Porsche was an overpriced piece of metal and plastic. Instead, he pointed to the divorce document lying in front of him. "What else is in here?" There are a few pieces of furniture I want to get, and I want to keep all my jewelry and clothes. Also, I'm not asking for alimony, and I won't be claiming anything from your 401k. Lois, why are you doing this? Justin asked, holding up the divorce papers in front of him. There's at least $200,000 in this house. The investments and all of our savings aren't worth half that amount. My reason is very simple, Lois said, narrowing her eyes. I want a quick divorce. It was Augustus's suggestion. He said that if I acted tough, the divorce could take a year or more. We both want to get married as soon as my divorce is final. However, whatever is written in those papers is contingent on your consent and expediting the divorce. If you resist, I will agree to anything, and August assures me that I will get everything I ask for. Justin's shoulders slumped, and he sighed. Well, I guess there's nothing more to discuss. I've avoided admitting the cracks in our marriage, but God knows I've tried unsuccessfully. It's obvious now that our marriage broke down long ago. Tomorrow I'll show these papers to my lawyer, and if he says everything is in order, I'll sign them. But Lois, I really think you should reconsider. I don't think this divorce is in your best interest. Justin, I don't want to argue with you about this. My decision is made, and I want a divorce, and I want it to go through as quickly as possible. Justin shrugged, and a tear rolled down his cheek. Even though he had known for months that his marriage was dying, the realization that the woman he loved so much no longer had any feelings for him was heartbreaking. It was so sad that this part of his life was now dead. Okay, Lois, I won't resist. I also want this to be a clean break, Lois said, narrowing her eyes even more. I don't want you to pine for me. I don't need emails and texts. I don't need cards and flowers and stuff. We'll divorce and I'll live in a different society. I don't want to be embarrassed by you. Justin only nodded and stood up. Lois got to her feet as well and headed for the door. Just remember, she shouted over her shoulder, if my lawyer doesn't sign the papers within a week, things are going to get really bad. As soon as Lois left, Justin pulled out his cell phone and called his assistant, Jennifer. She had been with him since he started at the telco and had been a pillar of support for him. Jennifer had not only been a great assistant, but had also helped him through difficulties when his marriage was crumbling. Justin felt he could always talk to her about anything, both business and personal. As Justin waited for Jennifer's response, a comparison of the two women flashed through his mind. Lois was incredibly beautiful, with a flawless figure. Jennifer, on the other hand, was slightly prettier than average and several pounds overweight. Lois could be loving and affectionate, or she could be cold and bitchy. Jennifer was the eternal optimist. In addition to being a very efficient secretary, she could cheer Justin up just by listening to his heartaches. And he needed to talk to her about the fact that his marriage was finally falling apart. When Jennifer answered, Justin said with a sigh, Lois just left. Did you give her the papers? Jennifer asked immediately. No, I never got around to doing anything, Justin replied defensively. But Justin, you promised you'd give her the divorce papers today. I know, but Lois gave me the divorce papers first, and the settlement she offered was much better than what I was willing to give her. Are you kidding? Jennifer was completely surprised. How is that better? I was willing to give her half of the share of the house, but she doesn't want any of it. I'd give her half of the check, savings and investment portfolio, and pay off the lease on her Jaguar. She only wants half the money. And she said she would pay off the lease for the Jaguar in August. Lois also wants to take several pieces of furniture, all her jewelry and clothes out of the house. What about alimony and your involvement with Telco? You know I was willing to pay her alimony of $3,000 a month for 5 years. However, Lois said she didn't want to. But really, if she's going to marry Augustus right away, it's a moot point. But the thing that struck me the most was that I was willing to pay her $5 million for half my share of the company, but Lois wouldn't even mention it. To tell you the truth, I don't think she knows I own a third of Telco. Lois was so angry when I left G4S that she didn't pay attention to what I was doing at the new company. And when she discovered that her lifestyle wasn't going to change, she didn't care. But why is she being so generous? Jennifer asked with some bewilderment. According to Lois, it was Grant's idea. Both he and Lois want a quick divorce so they can get married. Oh, Justin, I can't tell you how happy I am, Jennifer purred. It means we can get married before our baby is born. Epilogue. A year after the divorce, Lois was waiting for Augustus in the lobby of the country club when Justin walked in. He spotted her and smiled. "Hi, Lois, how are you?" he said, waving his hand. "What are you doing here?" Lois hissed. "I told you when we got divorced that you should stay away from me." Before Justin could say anything, the front door opened and Augustus walked in. He noticed Justin immediately and his eyes narrowed. "Mr. Wilcox, this is a private club. You must leave immediately. Your presence here is unwelcome." Just as Justin was about to reply, the club's secretary came out of his office and smiled at Justin. "Mr. Wilcox, welcome to Tequesta Country Club. Here are your membership cards, stock certificate, rules and regulations, and a schedule of upcoming events. I also want you to know that there will be a dance this coming Friday featuring a 7-piece band. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Mr. and Mrs. Grant, I would like to introduce you to Justin Wilcox. He and his family are our newest members." Augustus's face turned purple, and Lois's mouth dropped open. Then the two of them turned and left. A moment later, the door opened again, and Jennifer began pushing the baby stroller inside, looking around. Justin hurriedly held the door open, then kissed his wife and son and turned to the club secretary again. "I think we're going to be very happy here." 4 years after that incident, Justin and Jennifer were sitting at their friend's table during another club dance. Jennifer had found a babysitter and booked a room at a nearby Hilton hotel. She promised Justin that she would rock his world tonight, allowing no interruptions. As they sat in the room, Jennifer unexpectedly rubbed Justin's shoulder. "Isn't that Lois?" she asked, pointing to the woman and man who had just entered. Justin looked closer, and recognition came slowly. He didn't recognize the man at all, but the woman was Lois. However, she was much thinner and looked older. She was still a very attractive woman, but Justin wasn't sure he would have recognized her if they had passed by on the street. "She looks so thin. I wonder if she's been sick. And who is that guy with her?" Justin asked his wife. 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 "No, she hasn't been sick," Jennifer replied, "but Lois has been having a hard time lately, and the man she's sitting with is her new husband, Guy Hampton." "And what happened to Augustus? Did he kick her to the curb?" "No, he didn't kick her out because he died of a heart attack while lying in bed with his new administrative assistant. It happened 2 days before their 5th anniversary. "Why didn't I know that?" Justin asked with bewilderment in his voice. "I'm sure you heard about his death because it was on the news," replied Jennifer patiently. "However, you probably didn't realize why he was called by his real name, Mortimer. His real name is Mortimer Augustus Grant." "Oh, that explains it," Justin said, smiling at his wife. "But if Lois wasn't sick, why is she so thin?" "She had a rough 2 years after her husband died. Lois only got $200,000 from Augustus's will after he died. The rest of the money went to his children by his first wife and to charitable organizations. Poor Lois was left with the prenup she had signed shortly before their wedding. It stated that if they had been married less than 5 years, Lois would receive only $50,000 for each year. If she lived in the marriage for 5 years, however, she would get at least $2 million and their beachfront condo. "That still doesn't explain why she's so thin," Justin asked, studying his ex-wife. "No, she was trying to keep up appearances, but you know how expensive it is to live in this neighborhood and be a member of the country club. She quickly ran out of money and her friends dumped her. For a while, she lived on food stamps and lived in a rat trap in an urban neighborhood in Alhambra. Lois eventually married Guy, and they bought a house on the golf course. Guy is a partner in an accounting firm. He makes good money, but not as much as Augustus. Justin turned away to take another look at his ex-wife, while Jennifer continued to tell him about Lois's plight. When he turned to Lois across the dance floor, their gazes met. She smiled at him and then stood up. Justin was startled when he realized she was heading straight for him. "I think she's coming this way," he told Jennifer in a slightly panicked voice.